I remember the first time the knock sounded at my door, sharp and demanding, cutting through the quiet hum of my suburban street. When I opened it, 3 men in dark jackets flashed fake badges that gleamed in the sun, telling me they were with the HOA Enforcement Division and that I was under investigation. My first thought was confusion. My second was irritation. I had seen Karen's overreach before, her obsession with control, her penchant for dramatics, but this was new. These men weren't just bureaucrats. They were her pawns, her HOA cops, paid to harass residents she found inconvenient. They smirked as they handed me papers I didn't understand, citing violations that were impossible to exist, demanding access to my property as though it belonged to them. Something in their tone told me I needed to be careful. Something else told me that if I played along, I could learn everything I needed. I didn't call them bluff. I smiled and nodded, inviting them in, all while recording every word, every gesture, every overconfident swagger. What Karen didn't know, and neither did her temporary officers, was that I wasn't just any resident. I had been an undercover cop for years, trained to read lies and spot collusion. I let them think I was intimidated while quietly assessing their patterns, their communication, their chain of command. Karen wanted me trapped in fear, tied to false violations, humiliated by authority, and I would let her try. I even went so far as to play their game, pretending to be slow, frustrated, and compliant while planting tracking devices and recording cameras in spots they thought were safe. Every movement they made, every whispered plan about evicting me or filing fake reports, went directly into my evidence folder. 2 weeks into the investigation, I discovered something unexpected. One of the HOA officers, a young man named Greg, was uneasy, nervous in a way that suggested he wasn't just a pawn but a reluctant accomplice. I approached him one evening while Karen was ranting into the phone about resident defiance. I offered him a deal quietly, outside her view, and he agreed to cooperate. The twist changed everything. What was supposed to be a simple intimidation campaign turned into an intelligence-gathering mission, a slow unraveling of Karen's fraudulent empire. Emails, fake badges, forged compliance letters, all of it came spilling out under the pressure of a calm, methodical resident cop hybrid who refused to be bullied. The confrontation came one sunny afternoon when Karen herself marched onto my driveway, wielding a printed stack of legal notices like a shield, screaming about trespassing, harassment, and noncompliance. I stepped forward, calm but deliberate, holding my tablet showing every recording, every GPS tag, every text message implicating her. She froze as the HOA cops I had recruited turned against her, revealing that they had never been official, that all her threats were fabricated, that she had manipulated them like chess pieces. Her face went red, then pale, then contorted with disbelief as neighbors gathered at the street, watching the spectacle. People she had terrorized for years suddenly saw her for what she was, a fraud, a manipulator, a self-appointed tyrant. Karen's collapse was swift. Complaints filed by actual homeowners, video evidence from multiple sources, and confessions from the coerced HOA officers led to investigations by city authorities. Within days, she was stripped of any HOA authority, fined for harassment, and her false badges and letters became part of a public record. Her reputation, carefully curated over years of intimidation, unraveled in the space of an afternoon. Meanwhile, I became a sort of unintentional hero, not because I wanted the glory, but because justice had finally arrived. Greg, the hesitant officer, stayed on as a whistleblower, helping authorities understand the depth of Karen's fraudulent operations. By the end of it, I had transformed my home from a target into a safe haven. I had exposed the truth not just to protect myself, but to shield every neighbor who had been intimidated or bullied by Karen's schemes. I invited the local council to tour the area, demonstrating how easily power could be abused and how vigilant, informed residents could turn the tables on deception. Karen was left with her fines, public shame, and the reality that manipulation only works until someone refuses to play. She tried to argue her case online, but every post was met with laughter and screenshots of the evidence I had collected. In the quiet aftermath, I thought about what had happened: the fear, the strategy, the calm in the storm, and the unexpected ally in Greg. It wasn't just about stopping one tyrant. It was about teaching a neighborhood, a community, that courage mixed with strategy could dismantle even the most audacious schemes. HOA Karen had thought she ruled the block, but she hadn't counted on a resident who knew the rules better than she did. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the driveway, I smiled, knowing the lesson was clear. Integrity and preparation triumph over deceit. Now I want to hear from you. When power is abused and authority weaponized, is it always right to fight fire with fire, or does the law remain the only just path? Share your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Karen didn't just lose control that day. She shattered spectacularly. After the HOA officers revealed themselves as fakes, a crowd of neighbors, once silent witnesses to her reign, started asking questions, documenting everything on their phones. I could see her struggling to regain composure, her words tripping over themselves as she attempted to assert authority that no longer existed. The legal notices she brandished like swords now looked absurd, as if she were wielding paper shields against the undeniable weight of evidence. I stayed calm, observing her unraveling with a mixture of relief and fascination. She had underestimated one person's ability to turn her entire performance back on her. It was during the subsequent council hearing that the full scope of her deceit came to light. I presented every piece of evidence, every recording, every signed confession from the coerced officers, and even tracked the financial trail showing how she funneled HOA dues to pay for her private harassment operation. The room was silent except for the occasional gasp, the occasional muttered curse. Karen tried to interject, but the city attorney was prepared, quoting regulations, statutes, and fraud codes that rendered her protests meaningless. Even her loyalists, the ones who had once nodded along to her directives, began shifting uncomfortably, realizing that loyalty to lies held no legal weight. The twist came when one of her supporters, a retired lawyer named Judith, known in the neighborhood for being vocal about HOA rules, approached me after the hearing. She revealed that Karen had been using her name on official-looking documents to intimidate residents, forging Judith's signature repeatedly. That small revelation sent ripples of outrage through the council chamber, adding criminal fraud to Karen's mounting list of offenses. It was poetic justice in its purest form. Karen's obsession with control had made her sloppy, and that sloppiness became the thread that unraveled her entire scheme. Outside the chamber, neighbors began sharing stories I hadn't even heard: years of petty fines, threats of eviction, late-night harassment calls, and fabricated violations. It became clear that Karen's influence wasn't just oppressive, it was systematic. Every small fear she instilled had contributed to a culture of intimidation, but now that culture was dissolving in real time. People who had once cowered were stepping forward, inspired by the knowledge that someone had dared to challenge her. I realized then that the fight was no longer just mine. It had become a community awakening. Karen, for all her bluster, tried one last gambit. She attempted to file a restraining order against me, claiming harassment and defamation. I had anticipated this. My attorney, a calm, meticulous woman named Clara, had prepared a response so comprehensive that Karen's filings collapsed under scrutiny. Every lie she had told was cross-referenced with timestamps, recordings, and GPS data. The judge dismissed her claims, ordering her to pay restitution to the HOA members she had defrauded. Her public humiliation reached a crescendo when local media, tipped off by concerned neighbors, arrived to cover the story. Video of her shouting, flailing, and trying to maintain dominance went viral, a stark illustration of how hubris crumbles when faced with truth and evidence. The aftermath transformed the neighborhood. New HOA regulations were enacted to prevent future abuse. Oversight committees were formed, and educational workshops taught residents how to spot fraud and intimidation tactics. I was invited to speak, not as a hero, but as a witness to what vigilance, courage, and strategic thinking could achieve. Greg, the reluctant accomplice, became an official liaison between residents and authorities, using his insider knowledge to ensure transparency and fairness. For me, it was the satisfaction of knowing that a system once manipulated was now fortified against corruption. Even Karen's personal fallout was instructive. Once feared, she now navigated a landscape of distrust and skepticism. Her online presence became a cautionary tale. Her attempts to reclaim influence met with mockery or outright rejection. She had invested years in crafting an aura of authority, only to have it dismantled by patience, strategy, and the courage to act. She remained in the neighborhood physically, but her power was gone. Her ability to intimidate evaporated like smoke in sunlight. The real victory wasn't in watching her fail, it was in witnessing the community reclaim its voice and autonomy. As the weeks turned into months, I reflected on what had unfolded. The challenge had been more than just catching Karen in the act. It had been about dismantling a culture of fear, turning manipulation into opportunity, and ensuring that justice wasn't just theoretical, but real, visible, and enduring. I had learned to trust my instincts, leverage my experience, and collaborate with even the most unlikely allies. And I had seen firsthand that even the most audacious schemes could be dismantled by strategy, courage, and evidence. In the end, Karen's empire of fabricated authority was nothing more than a cautionary tale etched into our community's memory. Our neighborhood, once silenced by fear, had found its voice again, and I had the honor of being the catalyst. I hung a small wooden sign on my front gate, simple, handwritten, and resolute. Truth wins every time. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity, fairness, and empowerment. Now, reflecting on all that happened, I ask you as readers, when faced with abuse of power and authority weaponized against the innocent, is it always justifiable to respond with calculated countermeasures, or should the law remain the guiding path? Share your thoughts and weigh in. What would you have done in my place, and where does justice truly lie?